reach nowhere. So you have to find a way. Them no want you reach nowhere. So you have to find a way. Them no want to see you fly. Them no want to see you touch sky. Them no want to see you fly. Hey. Them no want to see you fly. Them no want to see you touch sky. Them no want to see you fly. Hey. Never wanna see you fly. Never want you touch the sky. Never. Reach nowhere, so you have to find a way. Them no want you reach nowhere, so you have to find a way. Them no want to see you rich, them will love to see you in a ditch. Them no want to see you pan tour, them no want you get more, so get more. Show them you not afraid them, go and load them. Every human have a something that them destined. That is your destiny, so be what you ought to be. Even them no want you reach nowhere, so you have to find a way. Them no want you reach nowhere, so you have to find a way. Them no want to see you fly. Them no want to see you touch sky. Them no want to see you fly. Hey.
Bling bling, now me call it cling clong. Every song I write, hit song. Every song I write, hit song. Tell me something, am I wrong? To believe in myself, put nobody above myself. Energy, build your energy. Love, charity, what a sight to see. What a colossal. Working and working to prosper. What you gonna stop for? Keep on, it's right on the corner. Hey, make way when I'm weird there. Hey, tell the hater them stay there. Hey, that is your destiny. To be what you ought to be. Even them no want you reach nowhere, so you have to find a way. Them no want you reach nowhere, so you have to find a way. Them no want to see you fly. Them no want to see you touch sky. Them no want to see you fly. Hey. Them no want to see you fly. Them no want to see you touch sky. Them no want to see you fly.
losing more than 1,400 councillors. And this is the change in council control. Once again, reform securing the most gains. But with so many councils now with no overall control, it illustrates just how fractured politics has become. In a moment, we'll hear from our correspondents in Wales and Scotland. But first, our senior political correspondent, Paul McNamara, has this.
A Labour horror show got worse overnight and today. Now down almost 40 councils in England, obliterated in Wales and squeezed in Scotland. But the Prime Minister says he's staying.
I'm not going to walk away from this. That would plunge the country into chaos. But that doesn't mean we don't need to respond. It doesn't mean we don't need to rebuild. It doesn't mean that we don't need to set out the path ahead. That's what I'm going to do in coming days.
That response and rebuild started today by appointing the Labour Prime Minister, who lost the 2010 election, as a special envoy on global finance, and one of Gordon Brown's cabinet members, Harriet Harman, as an advisor on tackling violence against women and girls. Not the move many backbenchers were hoping for. Are they enough to win back voters?
No, and I like both Gordon and Harriet, but it is a bit back to the future, isn't it? I mean, we ought to be looking forward. They will bring certain skills, but in the end, it's Keir. That's the problem. Yeah, he can do as many resets as he wants. The problem is people have stopped listening to him.
So is the only way of Labour moving forward mean changing Prime Minister?
Yes. But let's do it in a proper manner. The Cabinet's got to look at this now and say, we are the collective of the government. We're the leaders of the government. We're the leaders of the country. And we've got to take responsibility now on behalf of the country, not simply look at our own personal interests.
And if Cabinet members don't do that, if Cabinet members don't tell the Prime Minister he needs to go, what then? What can backbenchers do?
Well, eventually, of course, they can move to a vote of no confidence. I mean, look, don't let's go down that road. That's what I'm saying. That is messy. It's difficult.
The scale of bad results is so vast, some Labour backbenchers want immediate action. The party lost Lambeth Council today for the first time in 20 years. It's now under no overall control.
I like both Gordon and Harriet, but it.
Okay. Sorry about that. She realized I cut out just now a little bit. So I'm on my phone now. I had to rewind it for a second. Hold on, let me put this in. Yeah, I had to rewind it for a second. It is very important, and we gotta pay attention to certain things that he's speaking about with regards to the role of people who in the cabinet mind. Me not talk about people who in the opposition. Me talk about people who in the cabinet and how they have to react to certain circumstances. With regards to something that he mentioned, and this is also something that I think about. I am not saying that Denzel Douglas should be thrown somewhere in some kind of dirty room and we never talk to Denzel Douglas again. But what I'm suggesting is that Van's been done by the time he been where Dougie there now. Sim Daniel been done long time before that. I will go calculate pan Kennedy Simmons. But just with regards to the statement of the British Prime Minister bringing back old faces, this is not the time for that. You got to identify the new young sparks and you got to let them shine. But anyway, we're going to hear what he got to talk about with regards to backbenchers. Parliament in Britain is big, so you got people who would be known as the backbenchers. Think of the backbenchers like even the junior ministers. Think about it like in that them kind of terms.
Is a bit back to the future, isn't it? I mean, we ought to be looking forward. They will bring certain skills, but in the end, it's Keir. That's the problem. Yeah, he can do as many resets as he wants. The problem is people have stopped listening to him.
So is the only way of Labour moving forward mean changing Prime Minister?
Yes. But let's do it in a proper manner. The Cabinet's got to look at this now and say, we are the collective of the government. We're the leaders of the government. We're the leaders of the country. And we've got to take responsibility now on behalf of the country, not simply look at our own personal interests.
No. I can branch off of that statement, and this is why, for example, uh, um, and this is just an observation, don't kill me. But this is why, for example, the stance that has been taken by Cleon, Stapleton, Simmons, for example, is puzzling. For me, I don't know how this is being received, but in our reality, when you're dealing with real politics, then you don't just say you're independent. You do something to trigger a by-election and you prove that, yeah, you are indeed, and then you're independent. And this is why, this is the context in which you have to look at what Barbados is doing as far, and not only Barbados, I think St. Vincent has introduced this legislation to say you can switch. When you're in, you're in. Because that's one of the things that happened in Barbados. Man decided, well, same thing, I'm on the backbench in Barbados, but guess what? I'm not gonna lead the opposition, so let me go over there and make a lead myself. The other thing that is puzzling with regards to the Cleon situation is that, like, Cleon would have been the clear heir apparent, you know? So I feel like there was nothing wrong with biding your time. That's why I just kind of shocked. But as far as also what he said, this is the cabinet. Cabinet has a responsibility to look at the leader team sometimes and say, hey, you got to step down. You need to step down at this point in time. This is not the same thing that happened in the immunity, by the way.
And if cabinet members don't do that, if cabinet members don't tell the Prime Minister he needs to go, what then? What can backbenchers do?
Well, eventually, of course, they can move to a vote of no confidence. I mean, look.
No. This no, and by the way, these are people who right now, if the government was paying somebody to represent them, these is the kind of people who they would be talking to. Now, when you look at what happened in 2022, as described, when you are in government, you have one of two choices. You talk the leader out of being the leader. That is choice number one. After that, the only option you have is a vote of no confidence. You cannot fire the premier or the prime minister in any circumstances. And this is why I say, as soon as they basically kind of try make that letter the public that they want to fire Tim, the only option Tim got to fire you. So this is like the writing was on the wall, really and truly. Long before that.
Don't let's go down that road. That's what I'm saying. That is messy. It's difficult.
The scale of bad results is so vast, some Labour backbenchers want immediate action. The party lost Lambeth Council today for the first time in 20 years. It's now under no overall control. Enough, says MP Catherine West. She wants the Cabinet to elect a successor to take over from Keir Starmer.
If that cannot happen, and there are no leadership hopefuls who come forward tomorrow, then Monday morning I will put my name forward to stand for the leader of the Labor Party, and I will be seeking the 81 names that are needed to take to the party chair, and I will begin a leadership election.
Adulation by cabinet and conference alike, is tonight facing the first challenge to her leadership since she took over from Ted Heath 14 years ago.
Stalking horse leadership challenges, though, can trigger earthquakes. Sir Anthony Meyer's 1989 bid against Margaret Thatcher paved the way for further challenges and her eventual downfall. It's not just the Labour Party divided, we are now a fractured nation. The SNP are the largest party in Scotland, but do not have a majority. Plaid Cymru is the largest party in the Welsh Senedd, but do not.
Okay, well, so if you just following, and I'm going to recap in case it was too fast for you. But what is happening in the United Kingdom is that the Labour government, who is red, no care which way you go, Labour gonna be the red team. If you see a red team anyway, it's Labour. Has been getting punished in the polls. Mind you, these are local elections. This is like if Labour was running in Nevis, but it does have a bearing on what is taking place overall. No. When you look at what's going on, Labour losing seats that they're not traditionally accustomed to lose. And that is because other parties have come to the same people who does vote for Labour normally, and they have decided that they have a better message for those people. They got policies. They're not telling them, oh, we're going to fix inflation. They're telling them how they're going to do it. They're not telling them that they're going to get a job. They're telling them what kind of job and how they're going to set up the thing, the type of laws they're going to put in place to stimulate these type of positions. And so when I look at this now, this is why you could never in politics feel like you have the people automatically. It requires work, mind you, but you do, when you are facing any incumbent, have a responsibility to craft a message that is going to be better than what is currently going on in the country. And it can't just be vague, as we so often get in the politics that we have now. But yeah, cost of living, how we gonna fix it? How you gonna fix it? Why is the plan that you are telling me the plan that is necessary? What is the downside? What the upside be? People really want a plan that is gonna move them, and this is what is happening in the UK. And to be fair, outside a double salary, I don't see that Tim has adopted the same strategy, which is one of the reasons why I failed in PLP.
Not have a majority. More than 60 local authorities in England end these elections with no overall control. And on the issue of deals and coalitions...
No, and the reason for that is because if you look at if you translate the results that we've just seen in the local elections to, if you look at the analysis from some pollsters about what that would mean in terms of a general election, and it's not an exact science, but it's broadly around 28%. So we're a few percentage points away from what we would need to win a majority.
Are you ruling out doing a deal with reform?
Absolutely. We don't want to deal with reform. We want to make sure people understand they can make a choice to vote Conservative. If they want a truly centre-right party, a Conservative party, the only option for them is the Conservative Party.
No deals to be done, and for the Prime Minister...
It is also important to note as they said about Scotland, you have another party that get a bigger portion of the seats than Labour, but they do not have a majority. And yet still they are going to govern. They're going to swear in the Prime Minister, everything. And there will be a minority government. And nobody is panicking about it, as you could see from the video. What is going to happen as a result, however, is that to pass laws, they are going to need to make some concessions and they're going to have to speak to the opposition parties. So it is not doom and gloom, as I guess was suggested in 1993. No minority government.
Some ultimatums.
Paul McNamara there. Well, in Wales, the results were even bleaker for Labour, with Plaid Cymru ending 100 years of Labour dominance. All the seats in the Welsh Senedd have been counted. Plaid Cymru has 43, but is short of the 49 seats it needs to form a majority. Reform UK has 34, while Labour has dropped to just 9. Plaid Cymru's leader, Rhun ap Iorwerth, hailed the results as a new beginning and said his party will seek to form a minority government. Our Wales correspondent Andy Davis joins us live from Cardiff. Andy.
Once again, as I tell you, this is the UK election results. And so it involves all of the kingdoms, Scotland, Britain, that's the one that we will be familiar with, England. Now they're talking about Wales, and you also have, I think, Northern Ireland in that mix as well. But see the same thing in Wales. The former minority government, nobody got to pull with them here. All you got to realize is that when you're dealing with certain legislation, you are going to have to speak to the opposition. And you must also happen, you must also understand as well that as the opposition, you can just block everything, you know? Otherwise, you're defeating the purpose of government and you're not doing your job. So you got to be reasonable as well. It's just a different perspective, our way of managing your government and conflict.
Jackie, I think it's fair to say that Labour is still utterly shell-shocked by what happened here. It was, for the party in Wales, a monumental defeat. They've named an interim leader today, but frankly, they're still wading through the wreckage of yesterday's vote. Reform, of course, will now be a big presence in the Senedd, the main opposition, and their leader turned up today with other colleagues to be sworn in. But the big moment here happened when Plaid Cymru, marking their historic achievement, walked around the corner with all their new Senedd members to be met by an ecstatic reception from supporters. They were cheered onto the steps of the Welsh Parliament today. Plaid Cymru, after so long in opposition here, now contemplating for the very first time leading the Welsh Government.
I know how many people are celebrating this momentous piece of Welsh history.
For a party 100 years old, a party pro-Welsh independence, for them no moment has bettered this. In the crowd, a tearful former party leader, Leanne Wood, looked on as Rhun ap Iorwerth spoke of a new beginning.
No UK government, no UK Prime Minister, now or in the future, can cast Wales aside or turn a blind eye to our needs and our aspirations as a nation.
It's a really exciting time. You know, we dared to dream, people believed in that dream, and we just need to deliver now for the people of Wales.
What do you think?
Hugely emotional, and can't wait to see Rhun as First Minister. Thank you.
For Rhun ap Iorwerth and Plaid Cymru, this is momentous. For Wales, it is historic. Now the focus turns to how will the party govern without a majority. 43 Senedd members now, but still 6 short of a majority means deals will have to be made. But with whom? There are only 2 Greens and 1 Lib Dem.
The party will need to take a really hard look at itself.
Labour, whose leader in Wales, Eluned Morgan, was unseated in yesterday's colossal defeat, with just 9 seats now, said their focus was to start working out what went wrong.
What do you think this means today?
It's huge. It's change. People want change. That's what we're going to do.
One of Reform's 34 Senedd members being sworn in today alongside their leader, Dan Thomas.
I, Daniel Thomas, do swear that I will be faithful and...
They now become the main opposition, transforming the look of this parliament.
I am disappointed that I'm not First Minister. I'm disappointed we haven't got a Reform government. I think that would have been the best outcome for Wales. But now, the people have given us this job to do instead. I intend to do it to the best of my ability.
From Plaid Cymru came confirmation today they will try to rule as a minority government. You're short of a majority. How exactly do you intend to govern, and have you started any negotiations with other parties?
I made it clear that my desire, if we were able to, would be to form a minority Plaid Cymru government. It's clear now that we are in that position, and we will reach out to others on legislation by legislation, on budget by budget, on idea by idea, so we can start making a difference to the lives of the people of Wales as quickly as we can.
So he was asked the question, how he planned to govern. And we don't reach the coalition aspect yet, but it's such a wide-ranging video that it just happened that we get in already some details of things you need to think about when you're in the position of being in a coalition government. Being in a coalition government, and let me say this now, does not mean that you need to vote with the government that is in at all moments in time. Strategically, even if a few of you could vote against, these are important signals and important ways to indicate to the public that, you have misgivings. Even when we speak about the SSD again, the opposition, some members chose to support it and not give any critique in certain areas that they found concerning, and that is their right. But you do not have, as a member of a coalition, a responsibility to vote blindly with the government. So in this scenario, what he's saying is they're going to form a minority government, and when they're creating a budget, they're going to involve people from the opposition in order to get the budget passed. When they're doing legislation, same set of thing. So it's not the end of the world. It just means that your job involves more concessions, more. You just gotta do your job more. And the opposition in these scenarios has a greater level of leverage and influence.
Srinath Yorwerth will hope to be voted through as First Minister perhaps next week. The difficult negotiations, the horse trading, will soon begin. But for now, as he predicted last autumn, the hourglass has been turned. In Wales, a new political era begins.
Andy Davis there. Well, before Labour backbencher Catherine West announced a possible leadership.
The one thing I also want to mention, the negotiations start from the swearing in, he also is going to have to get other persons to say, yeah. Is that how we go? No, I'm going to have to check. I might be wrong on that. I might be wrong. The overall point you need to walk away with, though, is that minority government is not the end of the world. Particularly when you look at the fact that Sinkits is not really meant to juice a winner necessarily, at least not consistency. And I think that's why we have had at least um, four or 5 elections that resulted in a coalition government.
Bid. I spoke to the Cabinet Office Minister and Welsh Labour MP Nick Thomas-Symonds from his constituency in Torfaen, and I began by asking him how he felt about Labour's losses in Wales.
Well, we had a devastating set of results here in Wales. There's no hiding from that. There's no sugarcoating what has happened. And as I was out knocking doors, whether it was in my own area where I'm speaking to you from at the moment, or indeed more widely, I was getting a real sense that we were not delivering the change people voted for quickly enough.
For 27 years, the people of Wales returned Welsh Labour. Now, with barely 2 years in national government, they did not. It was carnage for Welsh Labour politicians yesterday. I mean, all of that points very firmly to what is happening at a national level.
Look, I'm not for a moment suggesting that there haven't been mistakes, and we take responsibility for those mistakes.
Labour had its worst set of election results on record. And Keir Starmer says he takes responsibility, the party must take responsibility, but he stays in power. He says he will fight on. You could write that as admirable loyalty, or his critics may well write it as arrogance or hubris.
It certainly isn't. I mean, the Prime Minister, I've known the Prime Minister for many years. He certainly doesn't have those characteristics. He's an extraordinarily resilient, determined, hard-working man who genuinely tries to make the best decisions for the country.
How are Gordon Brown and Harriet Harman the answer to those catastrophic losses?
It's about drawing on a deep well of expertise to help with that important job of delivery.
Which bit of Rachel Reeves' job is he now taking on? Does the Prime Minister not trust Rachel Reeves? How does Jess Phillips feel about Harriet Harman being in as an advisor on violence against women and girls? It looks like the Prime Minister doesn't trust the people who are already in his government.
No, that's absolutely not the case. It's about adding expertise, whether it's Gordon on global finance, but having Harriet's expertise in terms of tackling.
However, I hear the kind of questions what they might ask with regards to the advisors of the government. And this is not even, if they had a situation in the United Kingdom where you lose election and you come in as advisor, I promise you, it would not be going the same way. Oh, it going in the Caribbean.
Structural misogyny and all the great work that she has done, bringing to bear on that as well, can only help all of us.
The veteran MP Clive Betts said this was a case of back to the future, that Keir Starmer himself is the problem. People have stopped listening to him, and unless he goes, the losses for Labour could go on to be terminal.
I think that the Prime Minister won a mandate in July of 2024 to deliver over the course of this Parliament.
Yesterday's results suggest he's lost that mandate, don't they?
He hasn't lost the mandate at all. It's a 5-year mandate, and the Prime Minister is one of only 4 Labour leaders to win majorities in Parliament at a general election. So the Prime Minister has proven he's a winner in UK general election terms.
The job now is I don't mean to be disrespectful. You cannot call him a winner after yesterday, can you?
He led us to a victory where we won over 400 seats in Parliament.
So you're absolutely convinced he'll still be Prime Minister by the end of the year?
Yes, I am, and I think the Prime Minister, who is very resilient, will continue
to do his very best for the country, taking decisions as he does, with the whole country in mind, representing a politics of bringing people together, not the divisive politics that we see from the populists who are offering nothing but fantasy solutions for our country.
Nick Thomas-Symonds, thanks very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
Well, in Scotland, the final results didn't come through until the wee hours of the morning. The SNP secured its 5th win in a row with 58 seats. Not enough for a majority, though, while the Scottish Greens secured their best result yet. It was a dark day for Scottish Labour, coming second and tying with Reform UK, who have made a breakthrough north of the border. Live now to our Scotland correspondent, Catherine Sampson. Catherine.
Yes, for years there has been an assumption, perhaps even an assertion, that Scotland is somehow immune to the politics and the populism of Nigel Farage. An assumption turned on its head by this result that came through in the early hours of this morning. The arrival of reform in Scottish politics is a seismic shift. Now, there is no official opposition party title in Scotland, but second place does determine certain things about where politicians sit, about who gets the first question each week to the First Minister. Things that will need to be ironed out in the coming days as Scottish Labour now sits on equal pegging with an...
Every single week in Scotland, you get to ask the First Minister question. Every single week. You get voting, do your job.
insurgent party like Reform in a country Labour once dominated, in a parliament Labour created. On the streets of Glasgow, sounds of protest. Campaigners here had woken up to a new reality as Reform secured its second place finish in Scotland's Parliament.
It's just shocking, it's so disappointing, and just it's so sad to see.
We do not want a party that do not represent all the people of Scotland. That includes immigrants, refugees and Muslims.
Can we get a big wave from everyone, please?
As Reform secured 17 MSPs, Scotland waved goodbye to the notion it is immune to the political tides shaping other parts of the UK.
What we will be is we will be the challengers to the SNP, and especially if they get into cahoots with the extremist Greens, we will need to scrutinise that. The job of opposition will be to scrutinise.
Big thumbs up.
Some of his newly elected group have already faced scrutiny for their social media. Senga Beresford previously expressed support for Tommy Robinson online. And in 2024, when the deputy leader of Britain First wrote, "In the UK, Muslims are demanding Sharia law is implemented. I demand that we deport the lot of them. Who's with me?" she replied, "Me." Do you regret those comments?
No, I do not support Tommy Robinson. What I said is, he brought up the grooming gangs. I think somebody like that, yes, that's a great thing to do. Right, okay. Child rape is not acceptable anywhere.
So when Anna Sarwar says people like you want to deport his children because she wants to deport all Muslims.
I never said that either.
Scottish Labour's Anna Sarwar could have been a contender for First Minister. But after tying with Reform in distant second place, he stayed distant from cameras today as questions swirled about his strategy. Celebrations, though, in Edinburgh for John Swinney, a third decade in power and fifth term in office. SNP! After falling short of a majority, he's likely to form a minority government and is promising to try and find common ground with any party except one.
I'm going to engage in discussions with the leaders of all political parties. I won't be inviting Reform in to have those discussions. I will invite the other party leaders to come in to have those discussions individually, and I'll start that process next week.
The SNP have cemented their position as the dominant force in Scotland, but may have to rely heavily on the strengthened Scottish Greens for support. Together, they'll form the largest pro-independence majority this Parliament has seen, as Scotland's political map shifts again.
I guess the theme of them first that first video here was minority governments, how they farm, how they work, etc. Now we're gonna go into a kind of little explainer. Should I do the explainer for? No. You know, we're gonna stay in Europe. We're not in Europe. Let me stay in Europe. So we're gonna find out how European minority governments work. So we're using geopolitics to connect back to the Caribbean and to see like the different pressures that you could place and the different things you need to look at with regards to governments. Let me load up the UK video. Oh, my face is not there. So we're in the UK, but I'm not here.
This video was brought to you by the TLDR store. Get 15% off our pin badges by using code ELECTION. Represent your country and support the channel by clicking the link below. Speaking of 15%, that's about the proportion of our audience who live in the UK. That means a decent chunk of you live in a country that focuses on producing governments with strong working majorities from a single party, and that fears coalitions. And when I say fears, I really mean it. That might sound weird to viewers in Europe, but the British media really loves to create fear around coalitions, with former Prime Minister Theresa May even using the jibe coalition of chaos to try and discourage people from voting for Labour. But of course, countries can operate with a system of government whereby coalitions are regularly formed. So in this video, we're going to outline how European countries make coalitions work, despite the problems that scare away British voters. First though, it's actually worth acknowledging that even the UK
in ESCA, I think that this is a common circumstance. Because as I say, in ESCA, you got to win 6 out of 8 seats. So you got to be preaching no coalition. I'm telling you, ESCA got to be preaching clear cut. And if there is any weak Labour Party, anytime there's a weak Labour Party, that will be a circumstance where coalition government come in. And that's about roughly half the time.
has had coalitions as recently as 2010 to 2015. However, this coalition government demonstrated some of the biggest criticisms that people have with this type of governance. When the coalition was agreed to, the UK had 2 separate and in many cases opposing parties ruling the country. This could create some, well, difficult situations when trying to create policies. What if, for example, both parties wanted to do something very different? Well, as the Liberal Democrats demonstrated, the junior party usually have to compromise their principles, which doesn't always sit too well with voters. Think of tuition fees, for example. Liberal Democrats promising, we will scrap unfair university tuition fees so everyone has a chance to get a degree regardless of their parents' income, didn't exactly go to plan, and the Liberal Democrats ended up voting to triple tuition fees alongside the Conservatives. Their voters weren't sympathetic either, and they went from 57 seats in 2010 to a
You can't believe. Anyway, what I was saying is when you look at coalition governments, what he was saying there is that junior partners end up having to compromise their principles, and it is not gonna translate to the ballot box unless it is communicated to the voters. So when you look at, for example, the most recent coalition government, you did not see the concerned citizens movement suffer in the polls as a result of their involvement in Team Unity, PLP, PAM, but not the concerned citizens movement. And that's because I don't think it was effectively communicated what went on. I don't think it has been effectively communicated how much of a failure the Charleston Accord really has been. And this is by the testimony of the Premier himself. But it hasn't been highlighted in a manner to actually paint the picture. I mean, you go through budget after budget, and all of them were supported by the concerned citizens movement. But that is the party that agitates to build up unity. So how do you blend supporting budget after budget, but then saying, but you're not enough your share? This is the time then at the budget debates. This is why it is important, and the budget debate should be revamped, really and truly, so that you come in there and you are able to say, listen, if you want to be pragmatic as the Premier suggests, you say, listen, I support you and this, and that. But with regards to the fair share, it is not there, and I am not going to support this as a result. That would have been a fair statement, and that would have been a powerful statement in my estimation. And so you see, that was the effect as far as England. And this is the coalition government from 2010.
Easily 8 in 2015. Additionally, it seems that voters simply dislike the dynamic of having two parties in charge. In fact, following 5 years of coalition, only 29% of voters said that they wanted to be ruled by a coalition again. This was the lowest figure in 30 years. Also, neither party was able to fully enact their manifesto, and the papers often reported on various disagreements within the coalition. So you can see why the UK likes having one group in charge, one group that can make quick, decisive decisions, and be held accountable for those decisions. One
I'm mute again. In this stupid ass. I was saying, Ginger, you hungry? I was saying that after the last election, hold on. Ginger, relax, honey.
group who can mould the country according to their manifesto. After all,
Okay. Yeah, I needed to hear the word manifesto for everything to click back in. I got to give Jason some credit because some years ago he told me something and it was like, NRP should like apologize for like things that didn't go right and I didn't understand it at the time. But I do feel like a certain level of accountability is necessary in certain circumstances. And you also have to be able to engage with what your counterpart is saying and be able to dismiss it. The premier would suggest that the NRP didn't have a manifesto. And okay, but I think that their plans were out there, and regardless of that, they're not win. So it's more about your manifesto. And I haven't seen the counteraction to see what are the things that have been promised in the time by the concerned citizens movement. You could even do it from 2017 until now. I know certain things I have the top of my head that ain't happened. But I haven't seen that articulated. Because it is one thing for you to say, well, I don't even have a manifesto, but it's the next thing to say, but look at all of the things that I delivered from my manifesto. That's a completely different conversation. And one that I think needs to happen. Like where's the music studio, for example? But anyway, back to the
A
manifesto.
coalition is a government that no one voted for. So those are the criticisms. The biggest party can dominate to the detriment of smaller
I had to pause it there. This is one very important thing to know about coalition government. A coalition government is a government where nobody votes for. This is important to know. You ain't vote for a coalition. Now, at the same time, we also got to look at it like this. These parties are not running no giant campaign like what we saw recently, And I still have some observations from the last giant campaign where I see. Let me get in the observation now. Let me see what I think about it. Based upon the fact that when we look at the Team Unity time, Team Unity agreed that Timothy Harris is going to be the Prime Minister. Okay? Fine. Cool. We did not hear anything for any succession plan after that, but that's what we hear. If that is the case, it is fair for me. We are going to get to that. Since we know that happened in 2015, it is fair for me to understand that in 2022, let me read this here. It just spam my mind. Not having a manifesto and having a manifesto and not delivering isn't it the same thing? And this is my point. This is my point. Why am I distracted about who not had no manifesto when who in delivering pan the manifesto that they say they got? We need to talk about what is happening and not what is not happening. To an extent, it is a valid conversation. I even sent a question like that to NRP. What is your alternative to destiny? It's very important to have an alternative. But regardless to what, it's about having a plan about what you're going to do. So back to the story what I've been telling you. Now, remember what I said. In 2015, and this has been discussed at least from the CCMN, 2015 they agreed Timothy Harris, you're going to be the Prime Minister. I would it is fair if you want to do a joint campaign in 2022 with Pam, that there was some kind of similar agreement between CCM and Pam, which we haven't heard, by the way. But this is where my conclusion comes. If we look at the fact that Mark Brantley is the leader of the opposition, it seems to me fair to conclude that he would have also been the Prime Minister and had to give up the premiership. That's the only thing I could think about. If there was a deal that Sean would be the Prime Minister, why wouldn't they support Sean to be the leader of the opposition? Understanding and helping the party where you just run a campaign with, and understanding that you just support a Prime Minister will win one seat in the first instance and two in the next. So it's not like you never support a minority before. Anyway, criticisms of coalition. What make people not like that?
Parties. It's easier for the electorate to have just one party in charge. Parties can't always follow their policies, and it's just divisive. So, how do European countries make it work? And what can we in the UK learn from them? Well, the first thing to note here is that coalitions take many shapes and forms. For example, you can have a coalition between a very large party and a relatively small one, or perhaps a two-party coalition with the two parties not that different in size. Or you can have a coalition made up of multiple parties. This is
So different style, multiple different ways you could do a coalition. In the Singers and Nevis, the latest coalition, and this is the most unique coalition, I think, in the history of politics. We had the minority party getting the support from the majority. Well, in both instances, because CCM had more than them. CCM and PAM could have formed a government together at any moment in time. At any moment in time, the Concerned Citizens Movement and PAM could have formed a government, and rather than doing that, they decided to give Timothy Harris the prime ministership. But we have the variety where it's three different parties. So it's different aspects, a different farmer coalition. You could also have two similar sides. Seems to me that another possibility would be another team unity structure without CCM. But the politicians are not mature enough to talk about it that prior to the election. But the results will force it. But I almost see a possibility for a minority Labour government.
an important distinction to make too, because the size of parties is key to understanding the power plays that underpin the coalition. And that's because unstable coalitions tend to emerge from great power imbalances. For example, when a large party is able to extort a very small party. And the large party will become even stronger if it has other options and other parties it could work with if their partner decides not to play ball. At that point, a small party might think that accepting a raw deal is the only way to get at least some of the party's programme into government policy.
In the example that we had in St. Kitts and Nevis last, the other coalitions were like the one that he suggests. We could talk about the PAM and NRP, the Labour and NRP. But with regards to this latest one, the allegation is that the smallest party in the coalition was abusing the two biggest party in the coalition. I don't know how they get that bit.
Another way that a large party might be able to get...
You know what I'm saying? How about a coalition with a popular party and a not so popular? That's what they mean when they say a smaller party. and a big party could get together. You could foresee an example, for example, where a party in Sinkits get 5 seats and choose to form a government with a party in Nevis with 1 seat, whoever those parties would be. But these are examples where you go have a popular one and a not so popular one. But what we're looking at is the implications. When you are the small one, how much you gonna get to eat it? Are you really gonna be an equal partner within the partnership? How long you gonna take to dissolve it? You gonna take 7 years like some people to realize? Are you gonna be educated about the how coalition work from the start so that you could demand what you need to do your job effectively from the beginning?
Even more negotiating power is when that large party can afford for coalition talks to collapse. For example, if the UK Conservative Party were to grow so popular that they'd be able to run a government on their own if another election was called. So if coalition talks were to fail, or a new coalition collapses, they could put the blame on the smaller party and drift along with their favourable political momentum and secure an absolute majority in the next election. The reverse can also happen. For example, if a party is very large but just shy of getting a majority, and there are no alternative small parties for them to go to. This sometimes happens in New Zealand, where the relatively small New Zealand First Party could ask for basically whatever it wanted from the generally much larger Labour and National parties, who sometimes aren't large enough to form a majority by themselves. In all of this, you're probably able to see that
No, in the case of New Zealand, this is a case that is vital for us to understand. In the first team unity government, the very first one, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that they had the leverage, and I'm talking about the concerned citizens movement, to do what this minority party in New Zealand did. If they do not have a lot of alternatives, if a UETEC will make the engine go, then you could hold some brakes, you could take out and part. So the key time to make your demands, particularly when we're talking about the Charleston Accord, got to be from 2015 to 2020. You definitely can't get fooled twice. But your time of maximum leverage of target of being like this New Zealand scenario, you're the smaller party, but they need you. They gotta have you. Then you go look for yourself too. So these were years of neglect. A party in SK had 4 seats and one from Nevis. You gonna got to be 2 from Nevis. We went through the minority government thing in St. Kitts and Nevis, and that is where the famous inside speech come from. I think the original one. No, I know they come from, but that is what he was referring to. And all I'm saying is, Mark is still in the prime minister position. He said recently he will concentrate on retaining 3 seats in Nevis to get the I'm listening. Can you explain the minority government, please, and thanks? Well, as Ninja, come, darling. As mentioned in the in the video, where you secure the largest number of seats in a parliament, but you do not have the clear majority, you still are allowed to form a government. In those scenarios, however, in order to get legislation passed, in order to get budgets passed, and those type of scenarios, you will have to bring in members from the opposition, include them. It's really a more inclusive way to run a government. So, in the case of Singis and Nevis, if a party had 5 seats and nobody else want to support them, but and they still can't get together, let we talk about 1993. In that scenario, it seemed like a minority government is fine. No, 7 o'clock. So as far as me know, well, it used to be 8 o'clock, but that was when I guess when time been back, but we're on the same time, so it's 7 p.m. Back to the
It's
coalition.
clear that the election result greatly influences whether you'll be able to get a stable coalition with a healthy balance of power, or whether you'll get the opposite. And the more often you get a bad coalition, the more people will resent the idea of them. As such, the election system heavily influences the quality of coalitions. Systems that create two very large parties and a cluster of smaller ones tend to lead to imbalances of power if there's no outright majority. Imagine, however, your system tends to create a handful of medium-sized parties. Take Germany as an example. In Germany, the current coalition is composed of the Union with 245 seats and the SPD with 152 seats. Clearly, the SPD has very considerable leverage for negotiations, but if negotiations fail, the Union has other parties to go to, but not so many that it can squeeze out the SPD. Also, it's incredibly hard for a political party in Germany to get an absolute majority in the German parliament. So where the Conservatives and Labour have that option in the UK, no party in Germany can feasibly even try to do that. As such, coalitions in Germany tend to be relatively stable because no party has a disproportionate amount of negotiating power as a result of their electoral system.
One of the most amazing things about team unity is the fact that, as I keep on saying, the party with the least amount of seats was able to dominate. You could call it violate the Premier and Navy's people, so based off our Premier. There was never at any moment in time an attempt to say, Mr. Prime Minister, you will not be able to pass one single law until you get some legislation on the floor that is dealing with the future, that is dealing with something that is a PAM concern. And this, let me tell you something, right? We need to write books. Somebody need to really study this, what happened during those 7 years. Because as much as I could tell you, a prime minister is a dictator, a prime minister can't go fire. I know all of these things need a premier. It can't happen so. However, at the same time, I got to vote for you, you know. Spencer Brand got to say, listen, once you're in parliament and it's voting time, you got to say. And if you ain't go where one part that he say is, I'm not gonna be supporting you at all. And particularly in coalition governments, it is inconceivable, it is malpractice that you're in there for 7 years before you realize what is taking place. Particularly not understanding your true leverage points. Because by 2020, all the leverage.
design. Now, some might argue that yes, it might be good for coalitions to have multiple medium-sized parties, but what happens if your parliament fragments so much that you have an absurd number of parties, none of which are particularly large? Well, this is indeed a risk, and it does in fact happen in some countries. However, a coalition that collapses is not necessarily a bad coalition. Sometimes things run very well, with all parties being relatively happy with how things are going, until some sort of crisis suddenly hits. Unable to find an agreeable solution, the government then collapses. It'll be easy to label this as a poor coalition, but that would be to ignore the stability that came before the crisis. And in fact, if you have a system in which no one gets an absolute majority, parties tend to be more likely to come to an agreement out of fear of voters switching to opposition parties. This is especially true when you have a system of many small parties. For some parties in the Netherlands, it's very rare to be in government. For them, being in a coalition may be almost a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so that might motivate them to keep it stable by compromising and accepting some policies they don't agree with. A good tactic for smaller parties might be to focus on 3 or 4 of your key issues.
This seems to me what occurred in them 7 years. Because there is no way, I'm telling you, you are supposed to conceivably support everything and make the proclamations that you make. And then come back and tell me you was being abused for them 7 years there. No man, wink one the time, say, boy, something wrong here, so screw up your face. Don't tell me it's the best. Another thing I wanted to say is that the first video I showed when I showed the lack of popularity of the Labour Party in the United Kingdom. I say this because I think for the longest time that Labour has turned into a party for the elites. And is in the name. Labour is supposed to be for the workers and the working class. I'm not just talking about raising the minimum wage. No, I talk about skills and training and a real direction for where the working class is going to be moving. And I feel like Labour right now is an elite situation. Just watch the last Labour the way they had there. It's aimed about the workers. And I say that to say, any party, well, before I get to that, if Labour was truly about the workers, and then the St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party, they would be running people in Nevis. They would really try to get a majority by having politicians in Nevis who are speaking to the Nevis working class. The party who is able to formulate a message that appeals to the working class voters in a Nevis is going to dominate politics. That's the formula, because that's the most important set of people in any country.
And make sure that those issues are agreed upon in a way that's favourable to your party. They can then present this as a real achievement to their voters and present themselves as a feasible option for getting policy enacted. In this case, larger parties don't want to lose control by having to go through new elections in which voters might blame them for causing instability and having to renegotiate everything from scratch. That way, power between parties sort of balances out, with everyone incentivized to remain aligned and maintain the coalition. Also, it's important to remember that the problem with coalitions in countries with loads of small parties isn't perhaps so much keeping the coalition alive, but forming it in the first place. Negotiations tend to be very long in these countries, which is indeed a problem. But lengthy negotiations could benefit long-term stability, as parties will want to avoid going through this rigmarole again if the coalition collapses, and therefore they'll make agreements very carefully. This might be another explanation as to why coalitions on the continent tend to survive. From the start, parties ensure their interests are aligned to keep the coalition alive. Therefore, collapse tends to occur due to unforeseen circumstances, not because it was doomed to from the beginning. Hopefully, we've given you some insights as to how coalitions can be made to work, and what conditions are necessary to have a system with good coalitions that don't collapse every year. Either system can be made to work. Whether your system gets coalitions, and whether they're stable, seems not to be so much a choice as rather a consequence of other choices, like your electoral system. But that system is very much based on political culture and what you want a government to do. If you want those in power to be able to govern the country in a way they themselves think is best, and want to relieve them from obstacles, then you'll want to make sure that your system creates parties large enough to get absolute majorities. Otherwise, if countries are just short of that, then you'll tend to get a bunch of bad coalitions. Alternatively, if you want people in power to have to cooperate, even with other parties, rather than fight because you think this moderates the powerful, and in the long term prevents politics from swinging left to right in every election round, then you'll want to make sure that your system facilitates medium to small sized parties, so that no one can make tactical moves and make coalitions collapse. But what do you think? Would your country be better off with an absolute majority government or a coalition? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Before we go, and as I said at the start, using code ELECTION gets you 15% off the pin badges in our merch store. These are our Countries with Shoes pin badges based on our iconic designs, and we've made one for every EU country and a bunch of others. So if you want to support your country, show the places you visited, or just help the channel make more
Yeah, you settled much. I'll be done with you. Anyway, so I feel like that was interesting, and I get to understand see different farms. As he said, he speaking, and this is what we're trying to draw. By the way, we're looking at the conclusions, we're looking at the experiences that people gone through, and then all I'll be able to do, I'll be stand up on the shoulder. We could see a little further. And to say we had to always go through it, we could just be able to find where the information is, access it, and start to look at these different structures of governance in different ways and see how we supposed to utilize them for the best interests of your party, your nation overall. We're gonna end it off. We're gonna end it off with a lecture. I hope that you're captivated enough to stick with me to the lecture. We're going to Gresham College. Don't even know where Gresham College is, but this professor was delivering a banger. So we're gonna listen to the professor. He was delivering a lecture on prime ministers after the World War in the UK. By the way, the reason why we've been in the UK and Europe is because this is the system that we inherited. And so it is instructive for us to see how the original practitioners are practicing live as we speak. How's it going? And to understand the legacy, the history, the responsibilities, as I say, of these persons, the responsibilities of people in cabinet. We don't get into that in this video. So, yeah. So we're going to Gresham College.
Now, the main issue that people are interested in, I think, about the role of the Prime Minister is how powerful he is. And I want to give you two quotations about the Prime Minister's power. The first is the Prime Minister is the keystone of the Cabinet arch, and the British system has the advantage of flexibility, which allows the Prime Minister to take upon himself a power not inferior to that of a dictator, provided always that the House of Commons will stand by him.
That's right there. Real quick, as he's saying right there, as long as the other ministers support him, then the prime minister could be a dictator. You only could get abused in a coalition government or any government really if you stand by and allow yourself to be abused. Because the prime minister, in order to get his ultimate power, in order to get his way, he requires the support of a majority of the parliamentarians. And so this is a power that, well, at least this is the check that is on the power. This is the thing what will stop an elected official from becoming a dictator.
And then the second one, the precise amount of authority exercised by the Prime Minister must depend upon circumstances and his own character. In some cases, he may come near to being a dictator. And that, I think you would agree, is what a lot of people believe about the role of a modern Prime Minister. Now, those two quotations come from 1889 and 1904. So the fears about prime ministerial dictatorship and the dominance of the Prime Minister are really not new. And I think a lot of the people who talk about perhaps Tony Blair or Margaret Thatcher or whoever being a dictatorial or dominant Prime Minister really adopt a very short historical perspective. Now, the first claim that I can find that the Prime Minister has become overpowerful originated during the administration of Sir Robert Peel from 1841 to 1846. And after Peel's resignation in 1846, Gladstone, who had been one of his ministers, complained to him that your government has not been carried on by a cabinet, but by the heads of departments, each in communication with you. In other words, bilateral sofa government, if you like. The thing said about Tony Blair, that the cabinet didn't actually make decisions. So these complaints are nothing new. Now, in 1963, shortly before the end of Harold Macmillan's premiership, Richard Crossman, who was a Labour shadow minister, later become a Labour minister, he wrote an introduction to the famous book by Bagehot, The English Constitution, and he said the post-war epoch has seen the final transformation of cabinet government into prime ministerial government. And in 1965, a book appeared describing the prime minister as an elected monarch. So the fears about prime ministerial dominance and so on are really not at all new. Now, I take this view that the power of the Prime Minister shows no evolutionary trend towards an increase. And it's a grave error to think that somehow past Prime Ministers relied totally on their cabinets, whereas modern Prime Ministers are content with sofa government or bilateral relationships or whatever it is. Some years ago, I was writing about the Irish Home Rule problem in the 19th century, and I was looking at the way Gladstone handled it in his third government in 1886. And when the government was formed, he told ministers that the government's principle was to make an inquiry into whether Home Rule was compatible with the British Constitution. And ministers said that's fine, and they then awaited events. Now, Gladstone then proceeded to draft a Home Rule bill on his own and present it to the Cabinet and more or less tell them to take it or leave it. And most of them took it, but 2 ministers resigned in protest. But there was certainly no Cabinet discussion then about the measures needed to about how Home Rule should be implemented and so on.
So, at least I know the name to call it now. When you ain't talking, so Team Unity was what they call a sofa government, sofa cabinet, them kind of things they not talk. So this is what taking place when there is not a unified command structure in government. It's just one-on-one talks.
Gladstone did it himself and presented the ministers with a fait accompli. So I think people overrate the power of the modern Prime Minister and underrate the power of Prime Ministers of the past, such as Peel, Gladstone, Lloyd George, and so on. And in my opinion, the power of the Prime Minister, as I say, shows no evolutionary trend, but there's an ebb and flow. It depends upon vicissitudes, electoral and personal vicissitudes. And as I say, I think Gladstone and Lloyd George were at least as powerful and dominant over their colleagues as, shall we say, Margaret Thatcher or Tony Blair. Let me give some examples from the past which may interest you. Campbell Bannerman, who's not normally thought of as a strong Prime Minister, a Liberal Prime Minister from 1905 to 8, he held staff conversations with France, which committed Britain, in effect, to the defence of France, but he certainly didn't tell his cabinet about them, and they were completely unaware of them. Churchill committed Britain to the defence of Soviet Russia in 1941 when she was attacked by Germany without consulting any of his cabinet colleagues. As soon as he heard that Russia was attacked, he said, "We will come to the aid of Russia." His cabinet then agreed, perhaps they had to, but he didn't bother to consult his cabinet. Most strikingly,
so we could also see that it's not necessarily that these leaders will be talking to cabinet, man. If this is happening in these big nations, you feel like it's every conversation that is taking place right now. These people going go talk to members of cabinet, even if it's the ministry. Sometimes they ain't even talking to the public. You ain't see, yeah, I think in night time now. So the building by the hospital right now are built for sure. If you pass by the hospital, you go see what's going on.
Attlee, again not often thought of as perhaps a strong Prime Minister, he kept from his cabinet the announcement that Britain was to become an atomic power, that Britain was going to make nuclear weapons. The cabinet did not know about this. There is no mention of it in the crucial cabinet meeting in May 1948, nor indeed in the handwritten record of the cabinet secretary of that meeting. And when he was asked 10 years later in an interview why he had kept this hidden from his colleagues from in the cabinet, Attlee said, "I thought some of them were not fit to be trusted with secrets of this kind."
Once again, he talking about elected officials, and this is the Prime Minister of Britain, and he's saying, "Yo, I can't trust these people with the fact that we're pursuing nuclear weapons." So even a story about this, the frequency of this would be interesting. These are things that I would like to hear from past politicians. Like we need books, man. We need knowledge about what has happened so we could improve it.
In 1962, Harold Macmillan sacked 7 ministers in his cabinet in one night, the so-called Night of the Long Knives, 7 out of 21, a third of the cabinet in 1962. Now, I think it wouldn't have been easy for Tony Blair to do that, or Gordon Brown, or even Margaret Thatcher in some ways. And as I say, I think there is no ebb, there is no evolution of power. There's an ebb and flow. Now, the earlier quotation I gave about the power of the Prime Minister becoming like a dictator, it rested on the proposition provided that the House of Commons will stand by him. And that is a crucial thing. Now, Margaret Thatcher in 1990 found that the House of Commons, meaning her own backbench MPs, would no longer stand by her, and then her power disappeared, it went. Just as Neville Chamberlain found that in 1940, and Lloyd George found it in 1922, that these seemingly very strong Prime Ministers suddenly found their power crumbling from beneath them.
This is why I do not understand the tactics that were implied in March of 2022. What should have happened is that the ministers them simply tried to talk to Timothy Harris and say, "Listen, you're no longer the leader." If that doesn't work, his power must disappear. He can't do nothing without the support of the junior partners. He's really and truly the junior partner. He got to come to a PAM and CCM at any moment in time. So it was inconceivable. Listen, this thing is so crazy. PAM and CCM had the power while being in team unity to pass legislation that the prime minister voted against. They had the power to make things happen. So I do not understand the tactics that were implied in March of 2022. It is baffling.
But I think there's an even more important factor determining a prime minister's power, and that is their standing with the electorate, how they stand in public opinion. Now, I think one of the reasons why Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair seem powerful.
Sorry, I'll pause it so quick. But you see, he come back to the people, and he's even more important to the prime minister than he's standing with the other government, other parliamentarians. Is he's standing with the people. If you refuse to listen to the prime minister, any minister, if you do not want to hear what they have to say anymore, their political career is done. For sure, they're losing the election there. I'm telling you. Politicians go after attention. If you turn off the attention that you are giving a popular, any politician, if you turn off the attention,
Prime ministers was that they won landslide victories electorally. Margaret Thatcher won 2 landslides in 1983 and 1987, winning a majority of 144 in 1983, 100 in 1987. Tony Blair 2 landslides in 2001 and 2005. Sorry, 1997 and 2001. 1997, majority of 167. 2001, very similar, 165. Now, by 2005, that majority had fallen to 66, and I think one noticed Blair was much weaker then, and he couldn't even determine the time of his going. He was, by all accounts, it's gossip, but perhaps fairly reliable, that he was, in effect, pushed out by Gordon Brown, or had to leave earlier than he would have wanted to. But for a time, these landslide majorities, admittedly under our perhaps rather odd electoral system, because they're very far from getting 50% of the vote, about between 42 and 44% of the vote in each case, but under the system as it works, landslide majorities. So both Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair could say to their cabinet, I have put you where you are. You're in this position because of me. This is a personal victory by me. It's a personal manifesto. And therefore, I have great authority and power. Without me, you wouldn't be here. But of course, that isn't typical, because the average Prime Minister has either won a small electoral majority, or, as in the case of Gordon Brown or Callaghan in the 1970s, or John Major before 1992, they haven't yet fought an election at all, and perhaps don't look like election winners. And in those circumstances, a Prime Minister, I think, doesn't have very much power. I think power has gone back to the Cabinet. I think those are the circumstances now. I mean, Gordon Brown, I think it's generally thought, will perhaps find it very difficult to win the general elections. I don't think he's in a position to be a strong Prime Minister in the way that Blair was. And I don't think that's anything to do with his personal qualities or lack of particular personal qualities, but the electoral situation in which he finds himself. The same was true of Margaret Thatcher in her first term from 1979 to 1983, before the Falklands War at any rate, when she'd won a majority, admittedly, but a fairly small one of 43. Her economic policies seemed in some difficulty. Unemployment was high, inflation was high, and she hadn't yet shown her remarkable qualities. And I think at that stage she did have to defer much more to the Cabinet than she did later on. So I think there's an ebb and flow of prime ministerial power, which can't be explained in terms of any simple model of an evolution of cabinet government to prime ministerial government. And I think whenever people complain, as they did under Tony Blair, the Prime Minister having become too powerful, sofa government, or whatever the phrase is, I think one has to tell them to look at the history of the office and how there is this ebb and flow of power. And I think if we don't like the power of the Prime Minister, if we think the Prime Minister has too much power, there's a sense in which we shouldn't blame the Prime Minister or the Cabinet, but blame ourselves for giving them such a large majority. If you don't want the Prime Minister to have too much power, don't give them large majorities. On the other hand, it's fair to say that between 1992 and 1997, when John Major had a small majority of 21, it was very difficult to govern, particularly on Europe, because any 11 Eurosceptics voting against him could defeat him. And he said, the trouble is, I had a majority of 21, at least 13 of whom were mad. And it was very difficult to get a majority on a lot of these issues. But he had to weave and tack and turn to hold his position to get the Maastricht Treaty through, for example. And people didn't then say, well, isn't it wonderful, the Prime Minister isn't too strong anymore and too powerful. They said, this is weak government and no clear sense of direction. It's not what we want. So, and in a way, as the electorate, we're never satisfied. We say we want strong government, but when we get it, we say the Prime Minister's become too powerful, too strong. And when we correct that by giving a small majority to a government, we say, well, he's too weak and this isn't very satisfactory. But as I say, if the Prime Minister is too strong, I think we should blame ourselves as much as we do the Prime Minister, unless that's what we really want, in which case we perhaps shouldn't complain at all. But it's worth saying that there seems a natural reaction against all this, that Margaret Thatcher, a very powerful Prime Minister, but went too far and was pushed out by her colleagues eventually. She hadn't realised the force of the movement against her, and the Cabinet in the end said they weren't prepared to support her. She had to leave. And Tony Blair, as I said a few moments ago, forced to accelerate his retirement. If you look indeed at post-war Prime Ministers, I think it's remarkable that there's only one whom we can be sure left office voluntarily, and that is Harold Wilson, who was under no particular pressure to retire, but simply made a decision that he was going to get.
Maybe, I guess, because there's a lot more options in the UK. But understand that the pressure in the UK to do your job as the Prime Minister, you hear what he's saying? For instance, World War II, this is 1945, this is 81 years ago. Only one Prime Minister has left voluntarily. The moment you are not doing your job effectively, it is time to go. And it is a responsibility of those in your cabinet to indicate to you, hey, you might want to think about an early retirement. That's how this thing goes.
But I think every other Prime Minister was either pushed out by the Cabinet, by Parliament, or by the electorate, and perhaps ill health sometimes was used as an excuse for that. It's a salutary lesson, I think. Now, as I said, we often complain about powerful and strong Prime Ministers, but it seems to me that only a strong Prime Minister can give a government a clear sense of direction. And that when a Prime Minister fails to do so, and perhaps the Prime Minister who's been most accused of that in post-war years was Anthony Eden, but there have also been others, Harold Wilson, I think, John Major as well. But when that happens, you don't get strong cabinet government, you just get a failure of direction, a failure of government. And the cabinet doesn't operate properly. It operates just as a collection of government departments rather than a collective form of government. And it seems to me that cabinet government, if it is to work effectively, actually presupposes a strong Prime Minister. Not perhaps too strong, and we could argue about the precise balance, not perhaps too strong, but a Prime Minister with a clear sense of direction. And
in my estimation, these clear senses of direction cannot come unless the party has a clear identity. and so that everybody could project in a particular manner. So that's how come I just say you have to craft a message that is going to be appealing to the working class. These are the most important set of people in the country. There's 3% employers, 97% workers. What are you talking about?
The determination to achieve them. So I think there's no contradiction between the idea of a strong Prime Minister and the idea of cabinet government. I think the one presupposes the other. They're interconnected and they're interdependent. Now, I think that the best account of the role of a Prime Minister was actually written well before the post-war era in a book by Asquith, who was Prime Minister from 1908 to 16, and after he retired, he wrote a book called 50 Years of Parliament, published in 1926. And in that chapter, in that book, there's a chapter on the role of the Prime Minister. And he says that precisely because the premiership, the position, is a product not of a constitutional document, but of historical evolution, he says there is not and cannot be, from the nature of the case, any authoritative definition of the precise relation of the Prime Minister to his colleagues. And I agree with that. There can't be any authoritative account because it's a product of history and not of a document in the way the American Constitution is, or French, or the German. And he then said...
So that part, they would not apply to the Caribbean overall and to places that have a constitution. The United Kingdom does not have a constitution, not written down. So there are a different circumstance, but ours definitely got limits to how far they could go. You better believe that.
And I think this is absolutely right. The office of Prime Minister is what its holder chooses and is able to make of it. Chooses, but also is able to make of it what Parliament and we, the electorate, enable him to make of it. I think that is a key point. Now, the Prime Minister, in running his government, has, I think, a very odd difficulty, which isn't often pointed out, that he's in a much weaker position than heads of government in other countries because he has much less institutional support. This is obviously the case when you look at a presidential system. For example, the American president has a huge office of advisors all working for him, and the American cabinet is not like our cabinet. It's not a collective form of government. It's a group of advisors. And the famous story is told about an American president, I think it's Lincoln. He took the votes and said there are 19 against and 1 for. The one has it, because the one was him. And the others are all the advisors. They're not part of a collective machinery of government. And when we think of American cabinet ministers, we shouldn't compare them with our own cabinet ministers. They're more like administrative heads of departments, more like permanent secretaries. The Secretary of State in America is more like the permanent head of the Foreign Office than the Foreign Secretary, because he or she is an advisor to the President and not part of the collective decision-making procedure. Now, it's fairly obvious that in a presidential system people have much greater weight, but even in other parliamentary systems, for example in Germany, the Chancellor has a very large private office. And in other Westminster-type systems, in Canada and Australia, they have departments of the Prime Minister with over 1,000 people working there. They admittedly include people working in our cabinet office as well, but still many more than working in Number 10. And Number 10 has, I think, no more than about 150 people, and that includes people carrying out secretarial functions, very small.
For those not familiar with the UK, they call the Prime Minister office, residence, etc., Number 10. Number 10 Downing Street. So, when he's talking about Number 10, that is what he's referring to.
Basis for advice. And the Prime Minister lacks.
And he was also speaking about the difference between the American form of government and cabinet and the Westminster, the form that is prevalent throughout the Caribbean, the form that was inherited from the UK. In America, they got a vote, everybody vote against the president do I feel like. In the UK, however, nope, you got to get them people on board. And this is supposed to be the strength of the Westminster system. It is not supposed to be automatically and blindly you support the government, but sometimes you gotta go against. So it is different system.
The institutionalized advice which the large departments of Whitehall have, the Foreign Office, Treasury and the like. And it's easy to mock bureaucracy and so on, but if you're in government, it does help to have a bureaucracy of your own to counter the bureaucracy of other people. And people who worked in Number 10 have told me they're more impressed by the weakness of Number 10 than by its strength, that it really hasn't got the institutional strength you might hope that the head of government or executive would have. Now, that relates to, if you like, the managerial function of the Prime Minister. But I think it's a mistake to imagine that the main role of a Prime Minister is the chairman of the board or a managerial function. It seems to me the main role of the Prime Minister is to give a sense of direction to the government. And I think a number of great leaders, and I think Churchill's perhaps an obvious example, were not particularly good administrators or managers, but were able to give a sense of direction to the government. Conversely, some leaders have been pretty good managers, but poor at giving a sense of direction. I think it's perhaps a fair criticism of Attlee, who I think is myself rather overrated in recent years, that he was a very good chairman of the cabinet, very good at getting the...
When I'm thinking about these features, because I also believe in this. I've said that when it comes to being a minister, it's more about teaching. Those would be the persons who are managers and in a ministerial capacity. And the other kind is the cheerleader kind. But don't bother feel like it's just blind cheerleader as far as like supporting everything people do. It's about now having a level of competency to say, listen, this is the direction that we're going, and then to build the enthusiasm and that type of thing, having the charisma that you need to lead people in a particular direction. But it must still be a well thought out direction. You can't do the cheerleading for the cheerleading alone. That's actually on the back end.
Business through, but couldn't inspire the country or even his colleagues to any sense of direction as to where his government was going, inspire them. Now, the manager helps an organisation survive and make decisions, but the leader gives it a sense of purpose. And indeed, if you look at most of the reason why most MPs want to be Prime Minister, and particularly the 12 who've become Prime Minister, is not, I think, solely for reasons of personal aggrandizement or power, but because they have large public purposes which they have sought to...
That's an interesting quote. A leader is one who gives you a sense of purpose, whereas the manager is the one who ensures that the organization is going in the way that it works. What I would suggest is that ideally, if you can't get it in one man, because I find it would be difficult to have one man who possesses all of those abilities, then it should ideally be a situation where the deputy, there are other persons within the cabinet who are managers. So I don't necessarily think that it's about having a one person, but you need to be able to demonstrate that, yes, you do have managers on your team. It's a diversified approach.
fulfill, and which, so they believed, only they could fulfill. I mean, Attlee, for example, sought to create a society based on fellowship, what he thought a fairer and more just society than the capitalist society which he inherited, a different sort of society. That was his main aim. Churchill wanted to restore Britain's authority and power in the world. That was why he was in politics fundamentally, to ensure that Britain had more respect in the world, played a larger part in world affairs. Harold Macmillan, I think, wanted to adjust Britain's role to her circumstances. That was why he made the first application to join the European Community in 1961. Harold Wilson wanted to show that socialism was still relevant in the world of science and technology. Margaret Thatcher wanted to reverse what she saw as decline of her country, to make Britain powerful again by establishing better economic conditions, bringing the trade unions in the framework of the law, and so on. And John Major and Tony Blair, in a sense, sought to humanise her legacy. So I think when we're judging various prime ministers and seeking to ask ourselves how successful they actually were, we're not looking at them, as I say, as chairman of the board or as managers, but we're looking at them as leaders. Did they seek to achieve the aims that they set themselves? How successful were they in doing that? And obviously different people have different judgments about that, but let me end by the pessimistic comment made by Enoch Powell when he said that all political lives, unless cut off in mid-career, end in failure, because that is the nature of politics. And I think it's probably fair to say that you can go through the various prime ministers since the war with that in mind. I mean, Attlee was defeated in 1951, and I think by 1951, in any case, his idea of transforming society in a socialist direction taken a bit of a knock. Churchill sought to increase Britain's power in the world, but by the end of his career in 1955 it was clear, and was even clearer in the Suez expedition that occurred 18 months after his retirement, it was clear that Britain's power was going downwards. Harold Macmillan failed to adjust Britain's role to her circumstances. He didn't get Britain into Europe, which he hoped to do, didn't regenerate the economy. Wilson didn't succeed in showing that socialism could be scientifically and technologically relevant to the modern age.
Yes, the lecturer gave me a breakdown from British Prime Minister. You know one thing what I would say? The one thing that I don't understand from the Denzel Douglas years, and specifically the 8-0, I do not understand why the Labour Party did not fulfill what they suggested in their Green Paper. That was the moment to actually have a amendment to the Constitution and to give secrets to government. So, are you looking at it just purely from a Labour Party perspective? And I don't know that. When I say I don't know that, I don't know if he is what his thoughts were, if that was a goal that he set himself, but that was one of the things I always wonder about his tenure in office and why that wasn't pursued. I believe Sinkers need a government, a real government. I'm going to end this tonight, reminding to tune in to the topics tomorrow, tune in to everything agriculture on Friday. The posters supposed to be out with the guest. The guest for tomorrow is the farmer, Top Hop. I think he works in Texas now. His name is not coming to mind. I'm bad with names, but he will be on tomorrow to speak about his experience. And I think that the premiere is going to be on in a couple of weeks as well. So, I mean, Banky is the best guest booker right now. So he just cranking them out. So support the guys tomorrow. I hope that you taking in this information about politics, the way how politicians are not just supposed to accept anything and be dominated in coalition governments, how they're supposed to get things out, and not just get things out for them, get things out for the benefit of the people, and how it is inconceivable, given the circumstances I shared with you, that you do not exercise more power to bring harm and substance to the Charleston Accord. But anyway, that's it for tonight. Y'all take care. Bless up. This has been a heavy birthday month too. So I had birthday, I enjoy yourself as well. And thank you for watching.
Want to see you rich, then we love to see you in a ditch. Them no want to see you on tour, them no want you get more, so get more, show them, you not afraid them, go and load them. Every human have a something that them destined, that is your destiny, so be what you ought to be, even if no want you reach nowhere, so you have to find a way, them no want you reach nowhere, so you have to find a way, them no want to see you fly, them no want to see you touch down, them no want to see you fly. Hey. Bling bling, now me call it cling clong. Every song I write, hit song. Every song I write, hit song. Tell me something, am I wrong? To believe in myself, put nobody above myself. Energy, build your energy. Love, charity, what a sight to see, what a colossal.